So today I'm with Kimberly Hartman, a dear friend of mine, and she has a really amazing story. So we're going to get right into it.
Great.
You're like, what are we getting into? So Kimberly, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, let's see. I have two kids, two teenagers, one who's almost out of being a teenager, so I'm almost through that with him. And then I work at MSU, and I've lived in Bozeman for almost my whole life.
Well, tell me a little bit about, I know, we're coming here, we're talking about living brighter after abusive relationships. The very interesting thing is, I would say most of us, when we're in it, would not call it an abusive relationship.
It was even hard to call it that to do this.
Oh, yes.
It's like, well, I don't know if that's how I would describe it. Even now, it's hard. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yep.
So true. Well, tell us a little bit about your situation, because it involves some, well, we could call it some religious or emotional abuse, or we can just call it a very dysfunctional hardship, or whatever you want to term it.
Okay. Good. I like the freedom. So it was my second marriage. And we started dating right after my first divorce. So there was like very little time in between. And we were married maybe 7 years total. So we dated about a year and a half or so before we got married. And he was like, I was really looking for somebody who would make me feel protected and safe and cared for, and almost like a rescuer in hindsight, right? And so he was very proficient. He was very successful in his career. He didn't try to run away from hard things. Like, he would show up for people in the hardest of circumstances and do the hard thing. And so that was very, that felt safe that felt safe. And yet, when I look back on it, there was nothing about that was actually safe. Like, there was maybe 10% that felt that rush of security and safety. And the rest of it was all about creating uncertainty and about creating situations that didn't feel safe and created anxiety. And then he would then cycle back to being the solution to that uncertainty that he was creating. And so it was 7 years of that cycle just escalating over time. Like, it started out as, perceptible, but imperceptible to me, right? I was focused on that 10%, or maybe at the time it was 50% safety, 50% not safe. And over time it just became less and less safe and more uncertain, and just more of me having to tell myself a narrative that did not reflect reality in order to stay in that relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's give a little bit of context. So I think what helps is also, can you explain about your children, your beautiful children, just because I think that plays into it a little bit?
Yeah. So my two kids have a disease called osteogenesis imperfecta. And it means brittle bone disease, basically, so they break bones easily. And so they have limited mobility, varying degrees of limited mobility. And there were often acute issues as well, like fractures, right? Often there were fractures over small things they'll fracture. And so there was always this level of hypervigilance in our household already, trying to protect their safety and all of that. And so in the weight of carrying that, I thought I needed help with that, and I did, but not in the limited way that I the parameters that I put. I needed a romantic partner or somebody to almost rescue me from the heaviness of that situation, instead of somebody. It didn't have to be a romantic partner, and that's what I've learned since then, is that you can carry heavy there's multiple ways to carry a heavy load. And so I don't need a rescuer. I can carry that with a friend or a neighbor or my mom or whatever. It doesn't have to be. And so I really looked to him to be able to do that. And that definitely created what's the princess in the tower? What is she?
In distress, a damsel in distress.
Damsel in distress.
Yes.
Kind of scenario. And then over time, it eroded my self-efficacy to be able to do that on my own. Like I felt like I was so afraid that if I left that situation that I wouldn't be able to carry that weight all by myself. And so it was like what I would put up with for that little amount of help was, I mean, that's how scared I was to do it on my own.
Yes, I get it. And then remind me, when you got married, you already had one child with brittle bone disease?
Yeah.
Go ahead and expand on that.
Yeah. So my son is biological, and so he was from my first marriage. And then during my second marriage, we chose to adopt a daughter from China that also had the disease. We knew about that. She was in process with another family, and that fell through. And so we knew about her and her process and decided to step in and bring her into our family before her file got kind of put to the bottom of the files in China. And so we knew that she had brittle bone disease, and I we kind of knew what we were getting into, but also it was a whole different whole different rodeo. But yeah.
And let's also put a little context on this too, as far as your second husband. What was your relationship with God, and didn't he have a part in that, and then that was used to harm you?
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's kind of an important part of it. So he grew up Catholic and professed that he was a committed believer, and that spirituality and his faith was important to him. And when we met, that was not part of my life. I had studied it a lot. I kind of grew up experiencing some aspects of the church and youth group and that kind of stuff, but it just wasn't part of my life. And so I started attending church with him, and then that became something that it didn't start out this way, because it started out that I actually became more important to me than it was to him. But then he started to use that and his interpretation of the Bible to make requests. I mean, that's maybe more demands, but like expectations that I become a biblical wife, right? That the issue wasn't him, that the issue was that I needed to be more submissive and all of that. And I truly believe that. Like that was in my core. Like I felt like and that's one of the reasons I stayed for so long, is that I believe that there was something wrong with me, and if I could just be better, then this wouldn't be happening.
It's time to change the way you see yourself from God's perspective. Click the link below to get free affirmations and printable affirmations to support you in your Live Brighter journey. And that belief, if I could just be better or do more. And then how did you have to adjust, buffer, take care of yourself, take, medication?
Yeah.
How were you behaving when you were trying to cope with this?
Right. And it starts it escalates too, right? Because you try everything you can, because the cost of leaving is so high in your head and in actuality too, right? The stories you tell yourself about what you're capable of, that seems to increase the cost of leaving, but also the actual cost of leaving. Like you're gonna pay to be able to leave, and that's just the reality of it in some way. And so, so it would start with, normalizing.
Mm-hmm.
And so something would happen where, he would say he'd be home right so he would create situations where he would make promises I didn't ask for, but promises he made willingly, and then he would not follow through on them. He would break those promises.
Give an example.
An easy one would be, and this seems silly, but anybody who's been through this cycle knows it's not silly. An example would be, there's this unspoken rule that he gets to show up whenever he wants to and leave whenever he wants to. This was the rule that was established not verbally, but through behavior. And so in order to establish that, it was, I'll be home at this time, in time for dinner, and it was usually around a special occasion, often, like a birthday, or we were going to be at my parents' house, or we were supposed to be at a barbecue at somebody else's house. So there was or a wedding or whatever, right? And he would be like, I'll be home at 6 and we'll leave, and then blah, 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 right? And then he would not show up at 6. He would not call, not in advance, not after being a half an hour late. He'd show up at 7 or whatever and blame it on work, and have made no contact. And then if you chose to ask him, provide any level of accountability, or like say, hey, but you said 6 and now we're late, whatever it is, right? Then you would get verbally degraded, right?
What does that look like, the verbal degrading? Because there's lots of different ways to do it. So what was the flavor of verbal degrading?
Name calling, like, but not just like, you know, you're a stupid bitch or whatever. It was like it would be related to my character because that was like, you know, that's still something that I really value is like character, right? And integrity. So it would be like, you're just a diva and you're spoiled. That kind of stuff, right? Like my expectations were out of line. And if I can just like, if I expected less, but I'm just a spoiled brat and, you know, that kind of stuff.
Right. And I feel like a lot of destructiveness happens in that conflict resolution. Like that's where the true colors come out.
Yes.
So like you can tell by that the conflict resolution was a bit challenging. Overall, what would you say about conflict resolution?
With him?
Yeah.
Was like a circular spiral of misery. Like there I wanted to resolve it so badly.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to be able to bring hey, so you came at 7, you said 6. Is this because like it's not helpful to schedule things at 6? Let's never like, or is it more helpful for us to go and then we can just meet there? Like let's problem solve this. Let's like make this work for us. But instead it became about like, why would you ever expect that? That's terrible, right? And so I learned that like if you speak up, you get verbally assaulted and emotionally abused, and you don't get that connection that you so long for, and it's disconnection then until he decides to reconnect, and that would also be part of the abuse cycle. Or you choose not to say anything. So that's one of the buffering techniques is you stop saying anything.
Right. So it silenced you normalized. What are some other things that led to like buffering and how you dealt with this?
Yeah. Then as the like level of verbal abuse and emotional abuse escalated, right? The level that he was willing to take it to. So that would be more and more special occasions, right? That he would ruin intentionally, longer periods of silent treatment, no intimacy, physical intimacy whatsoever. There was none, right? Like ever, unless he had done something really terrible, and then he would use physical intimacy to sort of repair that temporarily, because I would buy it every time because I was like starved for it.
Yeah.
And so I would go for it. And then like to cope with that, eventually just the like twisting the narrative and being like, oh, it's not that bad. Other people go through this. Is just, and I would use the Bible and like the shit that I was told from some of, I'm sure, well-meaning people to be like, you know, Jesus suffered. You're just suffering like Jesus suffered. This will bring you closer to Jesus. And so you'd be like, okay, like this is just my job as a biblical, like as a Christian wife to kind of like bear this, and he just needs respect, and I just need to be more respectful, and then he'll be more loving, like all of that stuff, right?
Right, but as an excuse not to really deal with issues.
Right, because if I actually looked at what was happening, I would have to leave. Like I'd have to, and that would be too much. So then when that didn't work anymore, when I couldn't just tell a story and lie about it, it was just getting too bad. Like you just get to the point where, and then it was like being called a fucking idiot was like, I don't think that's normal.
No, yeah.
Like, I think that maybe
or not healthy, wasn't affecting you in a healthy way. Being called
or having him like storm up into my space in anger and get so close to me in anger where it felt like a physical threat, and that was the intent behind it, is to be physically intimidating. Then I ended up needing medication to be able to sleep and cope because my nervous system was so hyper vigilant that I couldn't rest and I couldn't think. So then that was anti-anxiety meds, and I would take them before he would get home, like right before, pop an Ativan, and then go to bed at 4 p.m. and then wake up, have dinner, and then go back to bed.
Wow. Yeah, and I don't think it's super common like to find a way to cope because it's so hard on our bodies, whether it's drinking or shopping or buffering in some way, eating, getting on medication. Me, I just went to the psych ward. That was fun. So, like there's just
like a little vacation from the abuse.
Yeah. So, yeah, so there's lots of ways to cope. And let's go, we're going to move forward.
Okay.
You chose to leave.
Yeah.
You found out how strong you are.
Yeah.
Looking back at that situation, what did you learn about yourself? Because as we know, we kind of have the bullseye on our forehead sometimes, attracting, unfortunately, some challenging partners when we're not completely where we need to be. What could you say about that part?
Yeah, it was unlearning. Well, first, oh gosh, I was thinking about this in preparation. It was so much and it was so good, but it didn't come as fast as I wanted it to. But it was definitely learning to listen to my gut again, because that wasn't helpful to stay. Like, if my goal was to believe what he was saying about what he wanted for our marriage, which, he claimed to want closeness and all of that stuff, and he claimed all of these things. In order to believe that, I had to shut down any internal instinct, gut, all of that, to make it work. So it was learning to find it. I mean, I couldn't even find it at first. So finding it, and then also learning who I actually was instead of the person that I'd become in order to survive. And so that was exploring things like that. That's when I did the dance class, which I hated, and started doing art, which I was told I was bad at in middle school. Turns out, who cares? I'm actually okay at it. And so exploring who I actually was, so that then and also learning to do things that I felt like I needed a rescuer to do. Going camping with my kids felt too much. What if something bad happens? I need a man there, or I need somebody there with me. And then just doing it scared. And then waking up the next morning, just being there the next morning because I didn't sleep. Realizing nobody
died. No broken bones.
Nothing, right?
Yeah.
And then also learning that I could carry the heavy weight of both kids' medical stuff. I could do that and actually do it more peacefully and more efficiently when I wasn't being verbally abused all the time. So yeah. And then now, so it went from just listening to my gut or finding it, figuring out who I am, and then creating a level of honesty in my household again, because I'd not only forced myself to lie and not listen to what was happening and believe lies, I forced my kids to do that in order to keep the peace. We all had to do that. And so just creating a culture of honesty and peace in my own household and setting boundaries about what would and would not be tolerated that were actually healthy.
Yes.
And not arbitrary rules associated with power and control.
Yeah, and you've done an amazing job. How the conversations you have with your children and all of that is just, to me, I love it. It's inspiring. You have close relationships with your kids, and you're teaching them not only do they have emotional intelligence, but they're able to assert themselves in a healthy way, and you're also able to give clear boundaries and all of that. It's pretty impressive. So.
Yeah. Thank you. It is. It's it feels so good, and it's been 6 years, and I've never been happier. I mean, it is just so, and I don't feel like it's a fragile happiness that somebody could or some unmet need of mine through me trying to meet it, that I will destroy it on my own. I won't. It just. It's not fragile. Yeah.
And it's kind of you're taking care of yourself, you're loving yourself, and that is you're loving God. The nice thing is it didn't destroy your relationship with God, where I feel like a lot of religious abuse can definitely do that.
Yeah.
So all of that, it's pretty amazing. And I think not only that, I mean, it's one thing to get out of a situation, then it's another thing to heal from a situation, and then it's a third thing, I feel like, to actually put yourself into a healthy relationship and to be to a point where you're willing to do that. So I think that's pretty amazing. So how do you feel about that? Was it hard for you to get back into, to have a healthy relationship?
No, super
easy.
Just very natural. I didn't do anything weird in that process at all.
Not at all.
No.
We've been friends for a while.
And dating was bad. Yeah. I my methods for keeping myself safe were entertaining.
You're good at entertaining.
Yeah. And so I would say dating was like a 1 step forward, 3 steps back, right? So that has not been easy. So my first step was I didn't for a while. Like I really took a break from dating because I didn't want to do any harm to anybody. And I also didn't want to invite more harm into my life because I wasn't in a place where I could even recognize it. So I took a long break. And then I dated a series of men who were not, it was easy for me to stay detached from them.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
Like it was just, and that's that. I liked that because that's how I kept myself safe. I was like, well, this is great. I can compartmentalize. I'll keep him over here. He'll think that he knows me really well and he knows this much of me, right? Like just a tiny bit, but seemingly they didn't perceive that. And so I did that for, I don't know, a while. A really long while. And then I took a break for a year of just dating, and I just I didn't think about men really at all or dating at all, and I just took a break from that. And then after about a year, then I actually met somebody who was emotionally available.
That's nice.
I know.
It's a good first step.
And can communicate and is safe and is patient and who I can tell all the stories to that I want to, and can hold that. And now it's trying not to run away from that.
Yes.
Because I'm still trying to figure out, even with somebody who is emotionally safe, how to protect myself instead of just trusting myself to be able to do that. Like I'm still trying to create walls a little bit instead of just walking along and being able to say, oh, I'll be able to say no to that. I'll be able to protect myself. That's hard.
It is. But you're doing a really good job because you're always checking in with yourself and you're always just making sure that you're, being honest with yourself and authentic.
Trying. Oh my gosh.
Oh, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Kim.
thank you.
Thanks for sharing. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you for doing this.